A story about the world of Agile. Fran, a project manager, worked for several years and was experienced in traditional project management methodologies. She was always able to deliver projects on time and within budget, but sometimes she felt that there could have been more collaboration and flexibility in the process. One day, Fran's consulting firm announced that they were going to transition to Agile and that everyone would need to learn the new approach. Fran was initially skeptical and resistant to change, but decided to keep an open mind and see what this Agile approach was all about. Well, her colleagues Mary, Jan, Johannes, and Jack had already been using Agile for some time, and they were very quick to point out to her that Agile was a mindset. It wasn't a methodology. It wasn't a framework. They were keen on teaching Fran about the principles and values of Agile. So the very first thing they did was introduce her to a website called agilemanifesto.org. They went through all of the values, individuals, and interactions over processes and tools, all the way on down to responding to change over following a plan. They were very quick to show her the 12 principles of Agile software, and Fran was extremely excited to learn this mindset. It sounded friendlier and made a lot more sense than what she had been using. At first, she struggled to understand the new way of working, but she began to warm up to it, working on Agile projects and attending Agile meetings. She started to see the benefits of the approach. The team was able to deliver projects quicker, and they were more responsive to change in the requirements. However, not everyone was happy with the transition. Some team members were resistant to change, and there was conflict between those who were fully committed to Agile and the skeptics. We call them the traditional diehards. There was conflict between them, and Fran found herself in the middle of a lot of drama and conflict, always trying to bring everyone on the same page, trying to get them to common ground and a common understanding, but it was extremely difficult for her. To help them all understand Agile better, management required everyone to become PMI ACP certified. And they brought in a guy called Phil from Praizion to deliver Agile training. Fran and her colleagues were able to learn more about Agile practices and principles, and they started to see how they could apply them at work. In the end, Fran was able to transition to Agile, and her team became more collaborative and flexible in their approach to project management. She was grateful for the opportunity to learn a new way of working and was excited to see how it would benefit their clients and projects in the future. Now, Fran had been working at her company for over a decade, managing projects, as I said. But one day, when management announced that the team would be transitioning to Scrum, she asked the question, what on earth is that? Just like everyone else did. And the unspoken story is that they were taught Scrum in a lot of detail. Remember, they brought in that guy called Phil from Praizion, and he began to show them how Scrum would unfold. He showed them that Scrum had beginnings in a vision of what the customer wanted. And that vision was encapsulated in a product backlog. That product backlog was then looked at under a proverbial microscope in a meeting that we will refer to here as sprint planning. In the sprint planning meeting, the team got together and they took a look at the product backlog rather critically. And what unfolded went something like this. As they entered the conference room, welcome to our sprint planning meeting for today, the Scrum Master announced. Today we're going to be taking a look at our product backlog, and by the end of this, we will have a clear idea of what exactly we're going to do in our first sprint. The Scrum Master cleared her throat. To get started, let's review our product backlog, and as a team, let's go through each item and discuss its priority and feasibility. She allowed time for discussion. The team began discussing the items one by one. Great, she said. Based on those discussions, let's now move into planning. We're going to pick items that we're confident we can deliver in the upcoming sprint. As a team, let's determine how many items we're able to take on. How many items do you think we can deliver in the upcoming sprint? Murmuring ensued in the room. Well, we've never really done this before, said one team member. Another team member proffered, based on our capacity, let's choose the items that we're confident we can deliver within the sprint. Let's also make sure that we've got a good mix of high priority and lower priority items. There was murmuring again in the room for a while. Fantastic, she said. Now that we've picked our items, let's move into the next step. We need to break down each item into smaller pieces that we can work on. We could call those tasks. Now, let's work with the first item on the list. Again, murmuring ensued in the room. Well, great job. Let's repeat the process for each item on our list. As though on cue, one by one, they went through all of the content. Imagine that the backlog ended up looking something like this. For example, they had the backlog items, who it was assigned to, the estimated effort, and of course, the status began to unfold for those items as they proceeded through the sprint. So, sprint planning was the beginning, and the next thing they had a sprint backlog like I showed you, and they went straight into the sprint, and every day they had a daily Scrum, a daily stand-up meeting. And in the daily Scrum, the team members got together to sync up. On many instances, the product owner was not there. The Scrum Master happened to be Mary, one of the team members who was on Fran's team initially. And here, Fran was going to work as a developer. It was a rather interesting dynamic to see teams that had been using traditional project management to now using full-blown Scrum. As Fran started to understand the three roles in Scrum, she began to see how they would fit into her new project. It was then announced that the product owner was leaving, and Fran would have to step in as the product owner. Something Ken Schwaber back in the day would refer to as, you can actually Google it. We won't say that here. But the product owner would be responsible for defining the product backlog and ensuring that the team was working on the highest value items. Her colleague, Mary, who initially was a seasoned developer and Scrum Master, was responsible for coaching the team on Scrum and facilitating the ceremonies. Finally, Fran's team of 5 developers, including Jan, Johannes, and Jack, would be the development team, responsible for developing the PM software tool that they were working on. So as they began to traverse every day, showing up for the daily Scrum, sometimes answering the 3 questions of what did you do yesterday to move you towards your sprint goal? What are you going to do today to move towards the sprint goal? And are there any impediments in your way? As they answered those questions, the team forged ahead. They became more committed to each other, and great things started to happen. Work started being accomplished. The burn down chart started burning down pretty quick. There was a space in the sprint that was dedicated to what we call backlog refinement. So even though the first sprint planning session was a little bit chaotic, the subsequent sessions ended up being more direct and better aligned. And here is why. The team decided to carry out a backlog refinement session somewhere here, somewhere in the middle of the sprint. Now, this was not mandatory in the Scrum Guide that they had all read, but it was much needed. So, with the help of the team, Fran, the product owner, Mary, the Scrum Master, they got together and they did a thorough backlog refinement session. Now, you might ask, what is a backlog refinement session? A backlog refinement session is where you get those items in the backlog to a ready state so that in the next sprint, you have items that are ready to be worked on. And this team decided to go with an acronym known as the INVEST acronym to meet the definition of ready. The definition of ready varies from team to team, but at a high level, you could say the INVEST acronym describes sufficiently for many teams what the definition of ready is. If a story fails to meet one of these criteria, the team may want to reword it. And these criteria are: the user story should be independent of all others, negotiable, not a specific contract for features, not one of those the system shall, the system will, the system must. It should offer value, it should be estimable, small to fit within an iteration, testable, and it should be such that it is not a contract but the beginning of a discussion, further discussions. That's why we say negotiable. So the INVEST acronym is what the team went off on, and when they met for the backlog refinement, they were able to get a lot of those stories broken down, prioritized, and estimated. Part of the estimating process was for the team to work on a game called Planning Poker, which relied on a deck of cards and triangulation. There's so much to talk about as far as that is concerned. But the skinny of it is the team used a deck of cards. They triangulated by having a bigger, smaller, same size kind of story. And the team chose a story and assigned a value of 1 or 2 as a baseline. They also had larger stories that they used as a baseline. And when they picked a story, they allowed for brief discussion, and each team member, based on the analysis of if it was bigger, smaller, or the same size as the baselines, they came out with a point system, and they showed their card on a count of 3. Now, this team decided to use the Fibonacci sequence that you see on the screen, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and beyond 13, 20, 40, 100 for larger size chunks of work, which are referred to as epics. But they had a pretty good system going for them. This team was rocking and rolling. So like I said, daily, they were having the daily scrum in the middle of the sprint. They had backlog refinement. The backlog refinement was a success. And parts of their daily scrum, they would actually walk the board as opposed to just doing the 3 questions. When all was said and done, the increment was produced. The increment was then inspected by the customer, or we could say stakeholders. The stakeholders also gave feedback as far as that increment and additional stories. So let's back up a little bit, because like I said, they wrote a bunch of stories even after the initial backlog, because the backlog is a living, breathing backlog. It is not stuck in time like our traditional artifacts. So the team had written some stories such as a project manager, I want to be able to import data from Microsoft Project into the new PM software tool, because they were working on the new PM software tool. The team discussed each item on the backlog. They broke them down into smaller pieces during the backlog refinement sessions. They used the 3-5-3 rule to ensure that everything they did in the world of Scrum that they were in was all above board. They didn't dilute Scrum to the point that it became useless. Instead, they added a few more features to Scrum, tailoring up and using things like a burn-up chart, a burn-down chart. And they also incorporated Jira and Confluence, and the team got pretty good at those tools. As the team started working on their task, they hit their first roadblock. One of the developers, Jen, was having trouble developing the data import functionality to work properly. She was so frustrated and feeling like she had let the team down. Fran and Mary worked together to provide Jen with the support she needed, and they were able to get the feature working by the end of the sprint. At the end of the sprint, like I said, the team held their sprint review session and they demoed, that's the word, the new data import feature to the rest of the company. Management was really impressed with the progress, and Billy Bragg, one of the skeptics, aired his opinion that he was pleasantly surprised that they were able to get that far. He had been one of the traditional diehards. It seemed like he was having a change in heart at the sprint review. Well, impressed with the progress that the team has made, they could now see the value in Scrum, and Fran was pleased with how well the team had worked together, and she was looking forward to the next sprint. So like I said, the potentially shippable increment was demoed, and once they got done with that, they moved on to the next event. And the next event, we refer to that as a sprint retrospective. But let's back up for a little bit. You see, throughout this endeavor, the team used the various events of Scrum, daily Scrum, sprint retrospective, sprint planning to keep themselves on track and to continuously improve. And they moved through the sprints. Fran started to see the value of Scrum even more and how it was helping them to work more efficiently and effectively as she had envisioned from the very beginning. You know, in the very beginning, she had just wanted to see the team do better and better and keep going. And this was absolutely awesome. I'm a fan of iteration-based Agile, she said. One quote that stuck with Fran throughout the project was, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. She realized that it was the people on her team and how they interacted with one another that was ultimately driving the success of the project. Now, at the end of each sprint, they had a retrospective. They looked for areas of improvement, and those areas of improvement were put either straight into the sprint backlog for the next sprint, and sometimes where they were very robust, they had to be reprioritized along with everything else in the product backlog. And this was how the team worked day in, day out. And at the end of the endeavor, when all was said and done, management was pleased with the final product, the team's ability to deliver it on time and within budget and in increments, all throughout a 1-year time span, made Fran and her team extremely proud of what they had accomplished. And they were looking forward to using Scrum on their next projects. But you know what? Because they had used Scrum initially and worked together as a well-oiled team, well-functioning, without any hang-ups, on the next go-round, they didn't have to pass through the Tokman Valley. Tokman's Valley. What do I mean by that? I'm really talking about the Tokman Model, the 5 stages of team development: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. You know what I mean. The team was able to bypass forming, storming, norming because this team was flying at supersonic speed. It was truly impressive. A few of the other artifacts that they were able to develop as part of the endeavor were things such as the product backlog. I did not show you that, and here's an example of the backlog, just raw as it was. And remember, the product backlog is regularly reviewed and prioritized by the product owner, who was Fran in this case. Also, I did show you the sprint backlog. So remember, the sprint backlog is a subset, and it has the estimates. It has story points. It has maybe effort if the team decided to pursue the breakdown in that regard. But generally, in the world of Scrum, we don't do a whole lot of hourly estimates. We could use other estimating approaches that are strictly relegated to non-hourly kind of estimates, because hourly estimates, they could get you into trouble. But anyway, the product roadmap was another fixture on this project, something else that was created earlier on with the first product owner. Remember, the first product owner left, and Fran was now made the product owner. So, my friends, that is the end of our story for today about the world of Scrum. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and share with your friends. You don't find a whole lot of stories about Scrum, but I hope this one made sense to you. I hope it excited you a little bit, and I look forward to seeing you on another video where we explore the adventures of Scrum. You take care, and bye for now.